A, E, I, O, U, A, O.
Learning a language can be embarking to a new world with much to discover. With the ever-changing world embracing new things in terms of culture, language and identity has become the new norm. We dive into the education aspect of how this has changed over the years as we see how Professor Githiri and so many of his classmates were taught back in the day. Every day it was the same story. Teachers get into class and teach them in Kikuyu, the only language they knew by heart. Back in the day, within the very heart of Kiambu County, education was an aspect that was still as important as it is today. However, the methods of instilling knowledge among the younger generations was somewhat different. Unlike today, with all the books scattered around, it is all systems go. Back then, the core values of necessity weren't the typical geography or a look into the book of numbers. It also incorporated teaching the younglings about values and cultural practices that were dear to the Kikuyu. So the bare tangible essentials like uniforms and shoes weren't particularly of interest to the children.
We didn't have shoes because we're not like that poor, but you learned that you can walk bare feet and it was fun.
Even the languages taught in the schools were for the major part of it Kikuyu, the only language the children had mastered by heart.
When I was in school, because the community where I lived in, the majority were Kikuyus. There were a few people from other communities. For example, we had some Kisses, some Kambas, some Embu. But I would say out of 100, you could find maybe 95, 96 were Kikuyus. So now the mode of communication was just Kikuyu.
It was important for the Kikuyu community to ensure that their children, their children's children, and even the generations after were conversant with the of Gikuyu and Mumbi.
What they used to do in schools was that class 1 to 3, it was mandatory, it was taught in the mother tongue. And the mother tongue in my area was Kikuyu. So everybody had to learn in the mother tongue. Starting from class 3, they used to introduce English, whereby now English was then used from class 4 onwards up to class 7.
Imagine being in a class where the teacher's only language of communication was Kikuyu. Interesting, right? For some others, growing up saw them being acquainted to Kiswahili as the main language of communication aside from their own local vernacular language.
In terms of learning and being taught, our teachers used Swahili mostly because I think it's in a rural area. So most of the time, Kiswahili was used as the language of teaching, mode of teaching. Then when we came, then when some things you are teaching becomes difficult, you default back to Kalenjin. And in Kalenjin this time you have to do Nandi. So since I was a Kalenjin, Kipsigis and there were Nandis, we had learned Nandi, so it was easy for us to learn. And when we go to play, we used to just speak in our vernacular. Main language of teaching was a good idea, but you see, you have to teach people to go out there. So yeah, that's why the fallback was Nandi, so that people can get the concept of what you are teaching. And that's why they really focus on Swahili. Apart from English, English was the only language we were taught in English. So yes, but again in English, when it backfires, you fall back to Swahili. Yes, so it's this there's a chain of fallbacks there. Yeah. When I came to the Metropolitan in Jomo Kenyatta Academy, it was a culture shock for me because my 245 marks, which I was #1 in the rural areas, was the bare minimum in Jomo Kenyatta Academy, because I became number 62 out of 66, and I had improved with 3 marks, so I had to 48. So it was interesting.
Adjusting to the new language brought by the white man was proving to be like walking on a thorn bush for most people back in the day.
From class 4, they used to have those things they call a monto. A monto was just some small gadget. It could be a piece of wood, a piece of stone, and then once we are given to you, what they used to say is that they had to trace the chain of from you, whom did you give it? So when you hear somebody speaking the local language, you give them the monto. And then that person is supposed to give to the next until evening. So in the evening, now you are called upon. You are given the monto. Whom did you give? So the chain of people were called out and then they were punished. It was important because what used to happen was that you would rather speak broken English than speaking the Kikuyu mother tongue.
I struggle very much because being a Kalenjin, there are some letters we don't use. Even in every language, every tribe in Kenya, there are some letters they don't use. There are some words they don't, letters probably. So you realize, like for us, for Kalenjins, we don't have stressful words like Z, like B, those ones you use like BH, so that to speak. So you find like if I'm to say Zilizo Fa, I used to think now is it S sofa or Zilizova, those I used to struggle a lot, but with time I managed to get. Even now I think I somehow still struggle when I'm, let's say, tweeting and just communicating with people. I have to write in Swahili, I have to really think about the Z, the S, the F, the V. Yeah, you see, it still comes out naturally. Yeah, those are the things that I picked up from my olden days up to now. And the T, the D, B, P, yeah, so those things I think will always be in us more often. And I think the more we speak in Swahili or English, the more they just erode in our system. Yes. But you miss out on some syllables, some words, and it just sounds off to them. And people used to laugh, and that's why they used to say kuangusha, meangusha, so like meangusha nini, you're not getting it. So with time, I learned like, there is a place for Z, there is a place for D, there's a place for D, and those words. So it was a bit challenging, and I thank God I did not understand, because he could have probably sent me to those places where people find people are depressed because they feel they're not appreciated. And I thank God I did not understand what was happening, so I just flow with it.
Slowly but surely, the English language managed to pick up in the education space in Kiambu. With this gradual transition also came a more refined system of schooling with incorporation of uniforms and the works.
I did not spend most of my learning in the rural areas. I studied there for a while, but then I transferred to Jomo Kenyatta Academy. I think currently it's called Jomo Kenyatta Primary, and it was in a metropolitan school. So this is where you go to mingle with people from different regions. And yes, the mode of study was English, so it was a bit challenging. And then now the speaking was, the just interaction was Kiswahili. But then we were being forced to speak in English while interacting. So it was like a very fast updating of your system, like my brain, to learn to speak in English. So I struggle a bit, but well, with time, I managed to get through with it, yes.
Coming into an urban area saw to it that Keegan gets the ultimate culture shock of his life.
Just 3 years before I cleared my primary school, so I had really short time to learn many things and adapt to the concept and adapt to the new environments. So yes, that was a challenge I had in terms of writing and in terms of talking as well. Yeah. In terms of interaction, there was this aspect of sitting down, like the seats. Where I came from, we were sitting in benches, like a long bench where about three of us, actually supposed to be three of us, but we find that because of lack of resources in such rural places, we could sit up to 5 people. So you come to this new school, you find you have your own seat and your own locker, and you have to sit on it. The teacher assigns you, you are supposed to sit with this lady, and you're not supposed to sit somewhere else. So you find for me, when I wanted to sit down, I could just go and sit in any seat that was open, because we are used to sitting down and squeezing each other with people, and in the rural areas, you could be sitting gent, a lady, and whatever. So when I sat in a certain seat, you find a lady walks away as well, like, what did I do? And like, it was another different culture shock. So with time I realized, like, oh, okay, people here do not interact just like that. They do not mingle just like that. Unless a teacher gives an authority that you're supposed to sit with this person, this is the person that you're supposed to stick with for the whole term. Until the teacher reaches a point, they say, now we are reshuffling class, so you can go and sit even with that person who was moving away when you sat down with the previous time, because now there's a teacher who has given that authority. So interacting with people was a bit challenging, because you are all coming from different places. There are things you do that might not really make sense to them, and there are things that they do that do not make sense to me. But with time, you just learn with time that yes, we are in a school, we all wear the same uniform, and you're supposed to do things in a certain way.
Over time, Kiambu grew to accommodate a larger number of people, all originating from different parts of the country. This increased into the perspective of appreciating other diverse cultures within Kiambu and its environs.
Yes, that is good because I would say, for example, when I was brought up, when you are just one community living together, you are told things about other communities which you later on learn were not correct. Now, there are some things that we used to be told that maybe some communities eat people.
Yeah.
So that was something that was common. They were being told that some community, maybe specifically they were being told this from Western Kenya, I'll not mention, but we are being told that they eat people. And once you are told that, you fear mixing with such people because they can eat you.
It actually affected how I spoke because of those things in terms of syllables and how I spoke. But I said, as I've said, that with time, those things eradicate. But then again, it still changed the way I perceive things, and knowing that we are different. And you know, when you come from a place where you are all speaking in one language, you know, and there's no problem, no one knows that there's another language that exists. And you've lived in a place where, you know, there's this notion that Kikuyus are thieves, the Luyas are these, these people are this and that. So you come and you have to meet these people, and you have to live with them, and you interact with them, and you realize like they're just people like yourself. So the more you live with them, you realize that yes, they're just people like ourselves. It's only that a few maybe rotten eggs that might spoil the name of a whole community and all that. So interacting with people was a bit challenging, but having to learn that well, it's only a few individuals that might be having a problem. Even from people from my community might be difficult as well, but you don't brand the whole community as ours. You just realize that it's just one or two people. Speaking as well, I think has changed how you interact with them, and you learn that yes, Kikuyus will have a problem with an L and an R. Yes, I've stayed with them a lot, so I'm almost having the same problem with them. Yes, so you realize that those things will just go with time. When they speak and they miss an L or an R, you just learn. It's just them, and they will speak and you'll not laugh like wameangusha.
For a millennial, the education system was somehow different from what was back in the day.
I was born and raised in Nairobi, so going to school was Nairobi primary. High school, I deviated to Kiambu County, which is still a Nairobi metropolitan, so I was still exposed to the town setting. So education for me was pretty modern. It was surrounded by modern facilities, equipped with trained teachers. It was interesting growing up in and even in my education. I have never been exposed to vernacular language in school, basically because it was a town setting, and there's so many different people from different cultures. There are Maasais, Luos, Kambas, all in the same classroom. So it gets kind of hard to pass through content through one vernacular language that is not predominant. So for me, growing up, it was a teacher gets in class, it's English or it's Swahili.
With the adoption of new systems in education, some cannot help the feeling that vernacular played a vital role in their shaping and upbringing, somehow wishing it would have been done as frequently as it was in the past.
Though a little bit tricky. Well, about currently incorporating the cultural aspect of our lives to the system of learning is a little bit tricky, because the way the dimension of this life is going nowadays is like we are going to technical, we are going to advance in economy, everything is more advanced. We are not going back to cultural. I think at this time, the only time I've had people talking about appreciating culture is when we have people getting married. That's when people get to know, like, oh, you must go back and pay cows and all that. But after doing that, we get back to our normal life, which is we have to live in the cultural, in the modern life, way of life. But I think going back to appreciate the cultural way of life is still good, just people to have some small nuggets of where we came from, but not really living in it, just to know where they come from, but not really living in it.
My feeling is that there are some things which are better taught in the vernacular. Let's say for the very young ones, there are some things that could have been taught in the vernacular. However, although they may be good, it's not possible because now people are mixed up. So it becomes, although it should be good, I think it's impossible. I would think that the kids, when they are still very young, there's need for them to be taught in some bit of vernacular. These days I find even starting from nursery school, they are taught either in Swahili or English. There are some things that these kids need to be taught in the mother tongue, such that even when they get at home, when you are told there's a cup, you should know there's a cup. But if you are told it's a kikombe, then it's not very fair. Yeah. So some things, especially involving things in the house, or even some of the activities that they do in the home, they should, I would think, at least class 1, 2 students should be taught in the mother tongue. Yeah. If it could be returned, I think I would appreciate it.
I think it would have been interesting if I got some exposure to my vernacular side. It would have helped me understand my Kikuyu traditions, the Kikuyu language itself, because today most of my family members really make fun of me because I do not know how to speak Kikuyu. They say I wang it, I don't understand. But yeah, it would have been nice if I was exposed to the culture and the language in my earlier formative days.
Today, with a fluid classroom incorporating almost all ethnic groups, the Luo, Kamba, Kisii, Taita, Meru, just to mention but a few, learning has become so much than the previous assembling by the fire routine.
Being surrounded by people coming from different cultures has enabled me to see Kenya, Kiambu, and essentially the world from a different perspective. Because right now, okay, back in the day, it was kind of hard for you to relate with someone like a Muslim or an Arab, because you're like, there's nothing that I identify myself with when it comes to that person. But being exposed has enabled me to understand that, oh, Muslims like this and they dress with hijabis and this is the reason why. Or most PCs like this kind of food, or most Kambas like to dress a certain way. because it even narrows down to religion. So me being in the same environment with the different cultures has enabled me to see the different side to what other cultures have to offer, and plus it kind of like reduces, or it if I could say, it like eliminates all these myths and misconceptions we have about different cultures. Because growing up, I was told that Kikuyus are so into money, but me being exposed to all these other cultures makes me realize, everyone likes money. So it's not a Kikuyu thing, or it's not a Maasai thing to want to like meat a lot, or it's not a Kamba thing to like mangoes. Yeah, being in surrounding with a lot of other different cultures enables you to understand that there's so many myths surrounding cultures that are just that myths. Even in Jomo Kenyatta, you find a contemporary classroom accommodates almost every culture there is, to white people, to Asians, to Arabs, to Muslims, and all these representations come with their own ethnic values, their own type of food, their own type of language. It is interesting to be able to sit down and be in an educational institution with these people. You learn so many things. You learn about the diverse cultures there are, you learn about their languages, you learn about their way of life, and it makes you adapt and embrace the different cultural backgrounds that different people come from.
The future of cultural diversity in education within Kiambu is impeccable. We look forward to a future where learners become more accepting of online technology, incorporating online classes in the daily dose of vitamin knowledge.
Theoretically, they can teach so many students. Unfortunately, virtual learning can be misused. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, for example, once you go, you open the session, you start the session, and then the students are supposed to come listen in. Some of the students just switch on their machine. So when you're monitoring, you'll be thinking that the student is there, but they're not there. It's only the machine which is switched on. They may be several kilometers away. Then, number two, I also did find that communication is not very good in several places. So if, for example, you have the students being located in their home areas, the signal is not, the quality of signal is not very good all over the country. So it might not be very good in some of the areas. Yeah. But if you are sure that all the students will attend, it's a good method that could be used for reaching out to several students. To me, I would not recommend it for the undergraduates, but for postgraduates. Because for postgraduates, they are keen and serious that they want to study, so they'll make sure that they're there.
They say that the labor of education is bitter, but the fruits are sweet. The students back then and those in this day and age can agree without fear of contradiction. Ultimately, cultural diversity in Kiambu has played a great role in its education sector. Some may say it is for the good, while others may be of different opinion. However, even the traditional men and women can agree that while change is inevitable, some of it may be good. So we embrace it as it comes.